to the first semifinals event of the One Valley Pittsburgh Startup Challenge. I'm Tara Lukabaugh, Director of Strategic Initiatives at One Valley, and I'll be your host today. In April, we launched a citywide competition to promote the top emerging startups in the Pittsburgh ecosystem. Over 200 companies signed up for the challenge and their chance to compete for a cash prize pool of $50,000, a free one-year co-working membership at the One Valley Pittsburgh Innovation Center, a free one-year premium membership to the Pittsburgh Entrepreneurship Platform, and of course, bragging rights. Today is the first of two semifinals leading up to the grand finale event on July 8th at the One Valley Innovation Center at the Roundhouse in Hazelwood Green. Startups will be given 4 minutes to pitch, followed by 4 minutes of judges' questions. 2 finalists will be selected by our panel of judges, and 1 finalist will be selected by the audience choice votes. Before we kick it off, I want to tell you a little bit about what we do here at One Valley. One Valley is a global entrepreneurship platform that supports entrepreneurs, accelerates startups, and empowers organizations across the globe that foster innovation communities. Over the past 6 years, One Valley has supported hundreds of startups that have raised over $1 billion. Our mission at One Valley is simple: democratize the resources of Silicon Valley and share them with the global community. We do so through a variety of initiatives, including events like these. Pre-COVID, we were running 80 events a year in person in our various innovation spaces. Today, not only are we running these events virtually, but the online accessibility of them has opened up these opportunities to the world at large. Now, I'd like to introduce you to Passport, our online innovation platform. As you can see, we have over 40,000 members on the Passport platform who access and interact with not only each other, but also dozens of corporate partners, hundreds of investors and mentors, and nearly $1 million in discounted or free technology tools and services. If you're joining us today from outside the Pittsburgh region, use the code CHALLENGE25 for 25% off your premium Passport membership. You can take advantage of the discount by clicking the banner at the bottom of your screen. If you're joining us today from Pittsburgh, I encourage you to visit the Pittsburgh Entrepreneurship Platform, which just launched a few weeks ago. PEP is an exclusive online community for Pittsburgh-based startups to help them navigate both local and global startup resources. PEP is powered by the One Valley Passport platform and was developed in partnership with Ascender and the Richard King Mellon Foundation. Eligible Pittsburgh-based companies now have access to a growing roster of Pittsburgh mentors, investors, resources, events, and a community of founders. Head over to the Pittsburgh Entrepreneurship Platform to take advantage of our launch rate of $99. Starting June 24th, prices go up. Follow the banner at the bottom of your screen again to take advantage of this early offer. In addition to PEP, One Valley is gearing up for the launch of our Pittsburgh Innovation Center at the Roundhouse in Hazelwood Green. In just a moment, I'll be welcoming One Valley CEO Nikhil Sinha to the virtual stage to share some more about our vision for this exciting development. But first, I'd like to give you an exclusive first look at the Roundhouse transformation. Once again, go ahead and visit the onevalley.com/tour Pittsburgh to schedule your tour. Now, please join me in welcoming our CEO, Nikhil Sinha, to the stage to share a little bit more about our July 8th launch in Pittsburgh. Nikhil, take it away.
Thanks, Tara, and welcome everyone to the Pittsburgh Startup Challenge. For many decades, Silicon Valley has been synonymous with technology, entrepreneurship, and startup-fueled innovation. But over the past several years, we've seen the incredible growth of tech entrepreneurship in many other parts of the US and around the world. We believe that Pittsburgh is and has been throughout history one of the strongest and most important innovation communities in the world. As the innovation landscape evolves, Pittsburgh continuously rises to meet the challenge, and we're excited to be part of its next chapter. The launch of the Pittsburgh Entrepreneurship Platform and the upcoming launch of the One Valley Innovation Center at the Roundhouse are just two of many investments we plan to make into the Pittsburgh community. As members of the Hazelwood Green community specifically, we see a remarkable opportunity to create momentum around the development of what will be one of the most exciting innovation hubs in the world. In the near term, as Tara mentioned, we hope you'll join us on July 8th for the launch of our Innovation Center, which will house and support startups, accelerator partners, venture capitalists, nonprofits, and corporate innovation leaders, and to watch the top 6 finalists of the Pittsburgh Startup Challenge pitch for over $50,000 in prizes. In the long term, we're excited to welcome startups, students, local businesses, curious lifelong learners, and the broader community to participate in our regular events and workshops, both at the Roundhouse and virtually, and to connect with the entrepreneurial ecosystem that is developing in Hazelwood Green. I can tell you firsthand, having just visited the Roundhouse yesterday, that it is one of the most unique spaces I've ever seen. The history of the Roundhouse is preserved in the exposed brick, in the original wood ceilings, and an unbelievable restored industrial crane. Modern glass, detailed elements and metals, and state-of-the-art furnishings give the building a futuristic energy. We see the past and the future of Pittsburgh coming together in that one building. The center is filled with artwork, light fixtures, and furniture pieces from local artists commissioned through an incredible partnership with Monmade. We look forward to continuing to work with local creators to make the Roundhouse our Pittsburgh home, and we look forward to sharing it with all of you very soon. To see the space virtually right now and to come in and take physical tours of the space, please visit the onevalley.com/tour Pittsburgh website. In addition to the Roundhouse, we have built and launched the Pittsburgh Entrepreneurship Platform, an exclusive hub for Pittsburgh-based startups to connect with both local and global resources and communities. Developed in partnership with the Richard King Mellon Foundation and Ascender, this virtual community is already very active. We've closed our first startup challenge on the platform. We've onboarded our first cohort of startups and mentors, and we will be very excited to shortly share a calendar of hybrid, in-person, and virtual events. In the coming months, we look forward to growing our online Pittsburgh community as we launch our physical innovation center as well. We'd like to extend a special thanks to all of you, our partners across the Pittsburgh ecosystem who have made both of these initiatives possible. During an unprecedented and challenging year, we were able to realize our vision for Pittsburgh only because of the support of everyone in the community. Our mission at One Valley is to support entrepreneurs, accelerate startups, and empower organizations across the globe that foster entrepreneurial and innovation communities. Through our innovation centers and our global online community of close to 200,000 entrepreneurs and innovators, we're excited to connect Pittsburgh's growing entrepreneurial ecosystem to the global resources they need to create, launch, build, and scale their businesses while staying rooted in the Pittsburgh community. Thank you. Good luck to all of today's finalists, and we look forward to welcoming you all at the Roundhouse on July 8th. Back to you, Tara.
Thank you, Nikhil. As Nikhil mentioned, please head over to theonevalley.com/tour Pittsburgh to schedule your tour of the Roundhouse. And if anyone has any additional questions about the upcoming Innovation Center or the Pittsburgh Entrepreneurship Platform, please don't hesitate to reach out. Again, on behalf of my colleagues at One Valley, I want to thank everyone that has contributed to making this vision a reality, especially the folks at Almono, the Richard King Mellon Foundation, and Ascender. It's been an honor working with you all, and we look forward to continuing to make strides together. Without further ado, let's get started with the pitching portion of today. I would like to start by introducing our judges. Our judges this evening are Nehal Bojak, Managing Director at Pittsburgh Creates, Juan Scarlett, Managing Director at One Valley Ventures, and Bobby Zappala, Managing Partner at Localized Capital Management. I want to thank you all for being here, and I'd love to just give you all a quick moment to introduce yourselves and tell us a bit about why you're excited about the Pittsburgh startup ecosystem. So Nehal, maybe we could kick it off with you.
All right, sounds good. Hi, everybody. Good afternoon, and so pleased to be here. As Tara mentioned, my name is Nehal Bojak, and I'm the Managing Director at Pittsburgh Creates. We are an industry-facing innovation center within the Pitt UPMC ecosystem. We work with established and emerging healthcare companies that are looking to build, validate, and grow the next generation of digital health technologies. In terms of why I'm interested in entrepreneurship, I've spent a better part of my career in Pittsburgh in the innovation and entrepreneurship field, investing in shaping and growing early stage startups through an incubator that I helped build and lead for 15 years or so. Been part of the Pittsburgh innovation scene long before Pittsburgh had an innovation scene or ecosystem. So have deep roots in the region, and I'm very, very interested in seeing local startups grow and thrive while maintaining presence here in Pittsburgh. So I'm very interested at watching this pitch event, judging, and hoping one of you emerges the winner and able to take advantage of what One Valley has to offer. Thank you.
Thank you, Nehal. Bobby, over to you. Could you do a quick introduction and share some of what excites you about what's going on in Pittsburgh?
Sure. Thanks, Tara. Hi, everyone. Name's Bobby Zappala. As Tara mentioned, I'm the managing partner at Localized Capital Management, also founder and board chair of Ascender. We're very excited to be partnered with One Valley as they enter the marketplace here. It's a very succinct reason why I'm excited about the startup ecosystem here in Pittsburgh is exactly the type of energy that we're seeing here around organizations like One Valley coming to Pittsburgh. There's a reason why that's happening, why there are more eyeballs on this city now than ever, and it's because of phenomenal entrepreneurs like those who are participating today, and many more who aren't participating in this pitch competition. It's just a really wonderful time to see such great growth, and also community building amongst the entrepreneurs here, and the desire to kind of share with one another lessons that you learn, and really kind of help each other grow and be successful. A rising tide really will raise all ships here, and hopefully One Valley, with its presence here and with the Pittsburgh Entrepreneurship Platform and the Roundhouse, can be a contributor to how you entrepreneurs can successfully collaborate and learn from one another and really build amazing businesses. So good luck to you all. Looking forward to hearing your pitches and doing what I do best, which is be judgy.
Thanks, Bobby. All right, Juan, how about you round us out with your background and what you're excited about coming into Pittsburgh?
Thanks, and good afternoon, everyone. Juan Scarlett, I lead the One Valley Ventures effort, where we work with partners to develop and execute venture investment strategies across the One Valley ecosystem. We recently launched the One Valley Ventures Fund, a seed stage fund focused on investing in standout digital transformation companies from across the One Valley ecosystem and in our partner networks. I've been in venture capital for the past 14 to 15 years. and broadly working in technology investing and research for the past 20 plus years. Prior to joining One Valley, I led an early stage fund called Nimble Ventures, and also a growth stage investing effort for Passport Capital. I'm really excited to continue to interact with the vibrant Pittsburgh area ecosystem. Really just excited about learning more about the area, more about the founders, and really just delighted to meet so many wonderful founders and AI and robotics experts. And so, most of it is most of the area is new to me. So I'm just thrilled to learn more about the ecosystem, and excited to hear about the pitches today.
Awesome. Thank you, Juan, and thank you to the rest of our judges. Today, you all have a very difficult task of judging these eight semifinalists on their upcoming pitches. But since there only can be one winner, you really have your work cut out for you. Our pitching founders today will be Ellie, founder and CEO of Behavior; Allison, president of Codex Labs; Doug, CEO of Loomis Corp; Brian, CEO of Street Sense; Michael, president and COO of Heart.io; Amber, founder of Conscious Unbiased; Sam, CEO of Duo Oncology; and Mark, CEO of Bloomfield Robotics. A reminder about what's at stake tonight: our top 3 semifinalists will join the top 6 who will compete live on stage on July 8th at the One Valley Pittsburgh Innovation Center at the Roundhouse in Hazelwood Green. Each of those July 8th winners will walk away with 1 year of free access to the Roundhouse and the Pittsburgh Entrepreneurship Platform, as well as non-dilutive cash prizes from a pool of $50,000. So let's go over all the ways that you, the audience, can take part in the action. First, ask questions to our pitching startups in the chat. If we have time, we may get to them. Next, rate each startup after their pitch. Your votes will determine the Audience Choice Award, and by rating, you will be entered in a raffle for the chance to win 1 year of free Passport for yourself. Finally, if you'd like to connect with any of our pitching startups, ask for an intro through the Meet the Startups tab at the top of your page. And so with that, without further ado, I would like to welcome Ellie, founder and CEO of Behavior, to the virtual stage.
Hi, I'm Ellie Gordon, the founder and CEO of Behavior. Behavior is a digital wellness company born and bred in Pittsburgh that uses behavioral health tech and wearables for relapse and overdose prevention. We help people stay on track with their recovery process by providing the right intervention at the right time in real time, and we help care providers better serve their clients. Our initial focus is opioids, including prescription pain pills, heroin, and fentanyl. The number of deaths from opioid overdose is increasing globally due to COVID-19. The opioid crisis is the deadliest drug epidemic in American history, and drug overdose is the leading cause of accidental death in the US and is expected to lead to 650,000 deaths over the next decade. This is a global problem that doesn't discriminate by zip code, income, or career. The propensity for returning to drug use or relapsing is high, and historically, tools to fight substance use disorders have been limited and retrospective. By the time a traditional intervention occurs, people are often already reusing. Validated through our IRB-approved clinical research studies, our tool has been shown to provide significantly reduced relapse rates, increased bodily and cognitive awareness, improved sleep habits, defined stress states, detected relapse risk states, and allows for more timely responses for at-risk individuals. The cost of addiction is $800 billion annually in the US alone, and relapse often leads to a costly downward spiral that includes lost productivity, criminal justice costs, and healthcare costs. So this significantly impacts everyone, regardless of whether or not they or someone they know is battling addiction. Here's a hypothetical example. Meet Amy. Amy is abstinent and in recovery, but then her father passes away. Now she's skipping her therapy appointments, has a racing heart, and she can't stop thinking about using again. Our system detects her physiological and behavioral patterns and shows Amy a photo of her daughter and a message that says, "I don't want to lose you again. I love you." We then connect Amy to her support network, and she makes it through this relapse phase without relapsing. The beauty of our technology is that it's completely customizable. Different interventions work for different people. We'll also detect overdoses for quicker access to life-saving medications like naloxone. Meet recovery. Our goal is to be a guardian angel on your wrist. Here's one of our device applications and a mobile dashboard monitor view. We have a diverse, accomplished team who are passionate about using tech to solve problems. Behavior is comprised of experts with professional backgrounds, including addiction science, design, software dev, AI, business, and wearables, to name a few. We also recently won the Carnegie Science Award. Behavior is currently coordinating pilots with treatment centers. Through the support of NIH and NSF, we completed successful clinical studies and market validation. Behavior is determined to end the opioid crisis, the deadliest drug epidemic in American history. Recovery, our patent pending platform, acts as a guardian angel on your wrist, using a wearable device and mobile app that monitors physiological and activity data for individuals in recovery from substance misuse and other mental health struggles. Using AI, our solution augments the current reactive treatment model by predicting and providing intervention for a relapse before it becomes too late. And this is a tool that's especially critical to deploy during the COVID-19 pandemic, when access to medical care and social support is diminished. We're looking for funding opportunities, strategic partners, collaborators, and anyone interested in conducting a pilot with us. With your help, we will create the best tools to help keep people in recovery on the right track. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ellie, for joining us. Now let's pass it over to our judges.
Thank you, Ellie. It's a fantastic issue that you've identified, and it looks like you have an amazing solution to address it. I guess I'm curious about a couple of things. One, you mentioned that some of the signals you're tracking are physiological and behavioral. Could you give us a little more information about what types of signals you're tracking and how they then kick off your response to the specific person?
Sure, yeah. So we're tracking things like heart rate, movement, and other stress indicators. Some things also like GPS location. Are folks attending their support group meetings and therapy appointments? So we're using a wide array of sensors, and that allows us to assess when someone's in a high risk state and has a pending relapse.
And if I can, one other question, and I guess just with regards to the action that you're taking, how have you trained your models to determine what actions to take? What data have you used to train those models?
Yeah, so we are using multiple different types of machine learning models, and for interventions, we have a specific model, and it's using the software application. So we start off with some basic interventions like meditations, contacting support network members and clinicians, and resources. And those are all coordinated with the person recovery's care provider. So that allows them to receive the interventions that work best for them. And then based on which interventions they're selecting, when they are in a craving state, then we use the model to determine which one to prompt in the high risk times.
Thanks, Ellie. Nehal, any questions on your end?
Yes, I have two questions, Ellie. And the first one was, you mentioned you have an IRB approved, you conducted an IRB approved study. So what was your, I guess, because this is an AI-based model that you're using, what was your critical mass of sample size that you used for the IRB study? Or, is that something that's kind of moving on to a latter stage phase?
We actually conducted multiple studies. So we did our initial feasibility study with a local treatment center. And that was starting off with one type of wearable that we were testing. Then we did a wearables comparison study. So the first one, I think we had about 15. The second one, we had 60 with 3 types of wearables. And then the third one was the longer term one, and we had about 20. So we actually were planning on continuing to 30, but then COVID happened. So luckily we fulfilled our research objectives, and yeah, so.
Perfect. And my second question was around reimbursement strategy. So obviously this is a pretty complex ecosystem with, the care providers and the healthcare providers and so on. So have you thought about, or what do you sort of anticipate as being the ideal reimbursement strategy in terms of the wearable and the mobile application?
Yeah, so we're actually working with a pilot partner for a pilot we're doing this summer, National Treatment Center chain. This has been a goal of theirs for years. They know that there's not enough coverage for services for substance use disorders. And so we actually have a plan of attack that we're working on with this provider, and he feels confident that it will be successful. One of the strategies is actually providing real metrics and data. That's a huge issue with providers, is that they do not have data. And with our device, we are able to not only do things like remote monitoring, but also collecting the sorts of stats that folks need to be able to get reimbursement for tools that work to actually help reduce relapse and overdose.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ellie. Bobby, anything on your end?
Well, Nehal stole a couple of my questions. I was really kind of interested, just from a business model perspective, Ellie, on just end user versus paying customer, and kind of what the cost of acquisition and the timing is going to look like in terms of like building these relationships and actually deploying the service. How do you kind of see that working?
Sure. So our end users are people in recovery, and our initial focus is folks with opioid use disorder, and we plan on expanding in the near future to other substance use disorders and mental health struggles. And we are using, and then the end user is under the supervision of the provider, who is our customer. So these are folks that are providing care to people with substance use disorders, treatment centers, residential homes, recovery homes. And we're using a SaaS B2B model. So per person, per month, and we're estimating a cost of about $25 to $30 per person per month.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much, Ellie, for joining us. And thank you to our judges for your thoughtful questions. Now we're going to move on to our next presenter. We have Allison, President of Codex Labs. Please join me in welcoming her to our virtual stage.
Hi, everyone. I'm Allison Bonk. Thank you so much for having me today. I'm a co-founder of Codex Labs, where we're building tools to help robotics and machine learning engineers use data in their core developer workflows. My co-founder and I worked in self-driving for quite some time, and during our time at Uber ATG and Aurora Innovation, we saw firsthand how the rapid pace of autonomy development leads to an explosion of logged robot data. When you're building hard tech systems with sensors, so robots, a lot of machine learning applications, logs facilitate development. So you collect a bunch of data, and then you need to store it somewhere, typically in cloud storage, and engineers will continuously use and reuse that data in a number of workflows. This can be building maps, training machine learning models, running simulations, etc. Organizations often struggle with the increase in data and therefore the increase in usage, because it becomes very hard to find and track the log or the section of a log that you need and actually connect it to the associated workflow. So what happens is developers end up wasting a ton of time trying to find and use their logs. Data often gets lost in the fray. You pay to store data that you never use, and you also pay to use data that doesn't provide value. And because of all of these things, your cloud and infrastructure bills explode. To address this problem, Codex Labs provides out-of-the-box tools to get the right data to the right engineer. Knowing what data exists and having the right tools to organize and access it will lower your cloud and infrastructure bills and get engineers moving faster. Engineers in automated pipelines use logs hundreds, if not thousands, if not tens of thousands of times per day. We're tackling an $11 billion market, providing the tools to store, index, filter, and inspect your log data. So you might be asking, what does this look like? Engineers can access this via an API, but also through a web portal. Here you'll see you can go and see all of the logs that you've collected as an organization and information about those logs. But logs can be an hour, 2 hours worth of data, and sometimes you really only care about an important 30 seconds. So we have this thing called events. An event is a subset of information that is particularly interesting to you. So here I say, I want to see every time I have a bicyclist around me. You can look at those events and then you can organize them into something called a log set. So this is all the instances of bicyclists that might be interesting to you. And then you can have those sorted. So every time you need to test your code in a scenario with a lot of bicyclists, or you want to train a machine learning model with bicyclists in it, you can access it via this log set. So with filtering and event detection, we can make sure that only valuable data is sent to each workflow. So I want to look at a labeling case study. Labeling is essentially putting a tagged box around an object in an image. A company can have 1,000 hours of video data that they need labeled for bicycle detection, but 10% of that data might only have bicyclists in it. So the old way, you'd send 1,000 hours of that video and pay 1,000 hours of labeling. But with Codex Labs, you can pre-filter and inspect, only sending the 100 hours of video where bicyclists are present, paying 1/10 of the cost. We have a paid pilot with an agricultural robotics startup and plans to onboard a safety detection computer vision company. Codex Labs is helping them save money on data-related bills and increase the productivity of their engineers. So if you're an investor interested in learning more about Codex Labs, or if you're a robotics or machine learning company looking to improve your data usage, I'd really love to hear from you. My email's on this slide, so please, please, please reach out. And thanks for listening to this, and I'll take any questions at this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Allison. Bobby, let's head over to you. Would you like to kick us off?
Sure. Thanks, Allison. Great presentation. A couple questions that are somewhat unrelated, I suppose. One is, what does the competitive landscape look like? And the second question would be, is there a size of business that you're going after as a kind of initial approach to the market?
Yeah, absolutely. So competitive landscape, we kind of have two categories of competitors. Our biggest one is actually the internal platform that exists today. We're built in a way that we can augment current existing internal platforms, so you don't necessarily have to make the build versus buy decision right away. However, we know that these organizations are staffed, they have people working on platforms, so we're here to augment their platform and kind of give them all those capabilities to lower their costs. Kind of our second competitor, you'll see, there's some usage of combinations of like Databricks and things like Snowflake to kind of create something altogether, but none of them is really a one-size-fits-all approach, and it kind of still only addresses one small portion of the problem. So we're kind of looking at this holistic approach that's really targeted for these sensor-driven companies to do that. And then I apologize, I already forgot your second question.
That's okay. You had me intrigued, and so I kind of forgot my second question as well. But I think I was asking about initial market, kind of size of target customer.
Absolutely. Yeah. So our early customer, we are focused a bit more on some of these companies that have pretty primitive data platforms, mostly because they're going to be some of the best information we can get on the end-to-end usage of our platform and figuring out all of our, getting that design feedback. That's pretty early. But once we have a pretty clear idea of that end-to-end piece, we can actually tackle any size company. We're really focused on organizations with about 50 to 300 engineers doing these things. And that's mostly because once you get above 300 engineers, their platforms are just pretty mature at this point, and below 300 engineers, it's just not necessarily the most valuable account. So that's kind of our core user.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely, thank you.
Nehal, maybe let's move over to you next. Any questions for Allison?
Yes. Also two questions. So one question, I'm going to piggyback off of what you just said, in terms of your ideal customer. So obviously you have very broad market applicability, and you have a customer profile that you've defined. What's your strategy? How are you going to go about kind of implementing your customer acquisition strategy?
Yeah, so we are committed to, initially, we're going to have a pretty top-down approach. It's very clear who our eligible early customers are. We're specifically focusing in the robotics use case because that's the use case that it is not a nice to have, it's a must have at this point. Whereas some of these other machine learning applications, we're still kind of in this nice to have mode, but eventually we know their bills are going to explode and it's not going to be so nice anymore. But we're taking kind of that top-down approach, but we do have pretty early on goals where we want some web interface, like people to be able to go in and demo with existing open source log sets on getting access to them and using our platform, just because we have seen and we know people who have successfully kind of rolled out these machine learning type of platforms in a bottom out way. So we want to make sure that people can kind of just come in and try it out. Because the group, though it's kind of broad, there's really the people that do actually want to index their log data also have the are also in a place where they hold an opinion at their organization about this.
Yep. And then you mentioned earlier, I think, competitive landscape. So what do you see as the barriers to entry, for yourself, for your company, in terms of protecting what you have and not having someone kind of replicate it easily? Do you have any IP?
Yeah, so we don't have any patents yet. There's a couple of targeted, I started my career at Boeing. I worked in some of our patent strategy for a little while. So we do have a couple of targeted pieces of IP that we intend to go for a patent on. But our competitive advantage is really focusing on this indexing problem from the perspective of bringing down costs. Some of the other players out there that are getting involved in kind of this sensor vertical, they're not starting with the problem of data costs are very high. You see places like Scale AI, for instance, that's a labeling platform. They're doing some things, but they're not incentivized to send less labels to their company, right? They want you to be sending as much as possible. So our focus on kind of taking that quick indexing for the intention of reducing your overall infrastructure bills, that's where a lot of our IP is around.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Juan, I think we have time for one question if you've got anything for Allison.
Sure. Thank you so much, Allison. Yeah, I actually would love to hear more about your founding team that you're currently working with. You mentioned a little bit about your background, but love to hear more about that and more about your team as well.
Yeah, so myself and my co-founder, Max, we met at Uber while we worked on their self-driving program. He has his background he started in high frequency trading. He's kind of a C++ junkie, moved to Uber, worked as an autonomy engineer, leading parts of the motion planning team and some of the infrastructure teams. And when we met at Uber, we were on a pretty small elite team. There were 8 of us. Half of our team were actually some of the founding engineers of Uber's self-driving platform. And we were working on solving a lot of these problems around data with respect to the developer workflow. So that's kind of how we met, where we've become pretty familiar with this problem because we saw it scale from a very small, when Uber was pretty early on in ATG, and we kind of got to watch it scale throughout the years at Uber. And so we've just seen a lot of these problems before, we've tackled them before, and we knew that it's not exclusive to the few very large self-driving companies.
Thanks again, Allison. Great presentation.
Yeah, thank you.
And thank you to our judges for all of your great questions. Moving on, actually, before we move on, I would like to just give a quick reminder to the audience to rate each startup at the bottom of your screen. You'll be entered for a free chance to win a Passport membership, and you'll be contributing to our Audience Choice Award. So go ahead and click on each company name at the bottom of the page. You can rate all 8 companies presenting, and then at the end of the event, scores will be tallied for the Audience Choice vote. All right, so back to our pitches. Up next, we have Doug, CEO of Loomis Corp. Welcome to the stage, Doug.
Thanks for having me. I'm Doug Nelson, CEO and co-founder of Loomis. where our goal is to make healthcare training more efficient and accessible. I earned my PhD from the University of Pittsburgh in bioengineering, where I was developing healthcare training technologies. And during that time, I became a simulation nerd. And I'm passionate about making training tools that are both useful and easy to use to address this big issue in healthcare. That issue I learned about in my doctorate work. So prior to starting Loomis, I learned that preventable medical errors were such a big problem. And for me, it became personal when family members experienced errors that had negative outcomes. In the next decade, a shortage of providers could make this a much bigger problem due to an aging population, aging workforce, clinician burnout, and regional variability in access to expert providers. Healthcare simulation like this is used to train current and new providers, and it's been shown to reduce errors and improve outcomes. Last year, the healthcare simulation market was valued at almost $2 billion, and it's expected to almost double by 2025. But training with simulators is resource intensive, and it begs for innovation. Current simulation often requires multi-million-dollar facilities. The simulators themselves are very expensive, instructors are needed to provide the training, and operators are needed to puppeteer the simulators. So to train just one new provider, you need 2 highly trained experts and 1 very expensive dummy. Our solution is the Insight platform, which merges the physical and the digital world to provide a scalable solution for healthcare training that's efficient, accessible, and engaging. Here's a demo of our Insight platform. It can be set up anywhere and doesn't require an instructor or operator. Students can use it on their own. Users interact with our patented augmented reality in a natural setting and on a platform that supports intuitive hands-on learning combined with rich digital overlays of anatomy and physiology. Our add-on sensors detect clinical actions that drive automatic responses. We can measure performance and give immediate feedback. And we've worked with expert instructors to automate this process, effectively creating an instructor multiplier, which supports 24/7 on-demand learning and allows training to be done in places and at times previously not possible. Traditionally, companies focus either on physical mannequins for hands-on training, or they focus on screen-based digital simulations. At Loomis, we merge the physical and digital worlds with our scalable Insight platform that can be used standalone or alongside existing physical simulators. And this is important because programs have these simulator morgues, literally closets and beds full of patient simulators that get unused because they require too much human support, they have minimal functionality, or perhaps are no longer even functioning. Our Insight platform can breathe new life into them to provide 24/7 training with real-time feedback and automated instruction. In response to the pandemic, we built a light online version of our software, making it scalable for online remote and hands-on in-person training. We have traction with multiple nursing programs and healthcare facilities, and we're ramping up efforts as we integrate more curriculum into our software. We've already converted paid pilots to sales. We're expanding to customers in other states. We recently closed a sale for multiple units, and we'll soon close 2 deals that are jumping over the pilot stage towards direct sales agreements. And our outreach strategy with CRM has enabled us to close deals from cold outreach emails and virtual product demos. We have a great team with experience developing technologies, scaling businesses, securing non-dilutive funding, and world-renowned expertise in healthcare simulation. It's been recognized by the Society for Simulation in Healthcare. And I'm happy to announce that we received notice of intent to fund our phase 2 SBIR from the NIH for $1.7 million over 2 years in the area of opioid overdose trainings. If we're awarded prize money from One Valley, we plan to use the proceeds to continue expanding diversity in our training offerings. We're Loomis, and we're illuminating healthcare education. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug. I wanted to address this with the audience, and I completely spaced. Just for everyone's awareness, Nehal won't be judging Doug's presentation, so her scores will not contribute to his overall ranking when we select our finalists. Nehal is an advisor to his organization, and so to avoid conflict of interest, she's just bowing out of this presentation completely. So with that, Bobby, would you please jump in and ask Doug some questions?
Well, if I had gone first, my first question, Doug, would have been, why on earth did you put together that group of advisors? What were you thinking? But I guess I'll just skip past that one. But congratulations. It sounds like you've made some real progress. This is the healthcare and medical space is not something I'm entirely familiar with. So can you explain to me, Doug, how this kind of process toward commercialization works? You said you're entering into a phase 2 now, and you've received some significant funding there, and congratulations on that. But how does this then translate into the kind of commercial application and getting into sales cycles with this?
Yeah, so just to dispel any confusion here, medical simulation is training, just like any kind of other education that you might go into the trade. So this space is not actually regulated like other life science companies. So we don't have to go through an FDA process. So just to have that be clear, we already have some paying customers, paid pilots that have also converted into full sales agreements. Just closed another deal with a community college a couple weeks ago. So we're already in the market space, gaining some early traction. We don't need to go through those FDA hurdles if that was confusing.
Gotcha. No, yeah, sorry, I didn't have a perfect understanding. So as part of the growth model, then the intent is to continue to seek non-dilutive sources of capital to go after other areas of training as well?
Yeah, so we looked at the opportunity that Ellie was telling us about, where the opioid epidemic is the underlying pandemic, right, to COVID right now. And we looked at one opportunity for providing training opportunities in recognizing and responding opioid overdoses for lay people and clinicians. And we did a phase 1 SBIR with NIH to develop that prototype. And we were just received notice of intent to get a phase 2. Our go-to-market strategy is really focusing on pre-licensure training, nursing programs, undergraduate programs, medical schools, and starting building curriculum from there. B2B model, selling to academic institutions, hospital systems, providing continuing education is that next step, where all practicing providers need to keep their licensure up and do continuing education in order to keep that licensure.
Last question, it's kind of unrelated. Is there any exposure to your business on a liability front, just by the nature of the training and with so much litigation around, human error in these instances? Is there some exposure there to you?
Perhaps later down the line. I know part of the long-term roadmap is also looking at interacting with companies to provide training for their specific devices. Near term, no. Long term, yes, and it's something that we're looking at. But it would also be like a physician getting sued for malpractice and it going all the way back to the university level. So not so much of an issue, yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bobby. Juan, over to you. Any questions for Doug?
Sure. Thank you, Doug. Just one follow-up from Bobby's questions. I guess I'm curious, how difficult is it for you to add new training programs to your solution?
Great question. So rate limiting steps are, do we have an anatomy model and animation that you want to train with? That's kind of the biggest issue. One of the things we identified through our pilots is a process and protocol for taking the learning objectives from faculty members, distilling them out into a template. And we're in the process, we should have this summer, an automation of that to build into scenarios themselves. So from instruction set and eliciting what those learning objectives and the script is for that scenario to putting it in will be automated by the end of this summer.
Thank you. And then just real quick, the business model, how are you charging for this solution?
Yeah, right now it's a combination of physical product sale and a SaaS model. Right now, the heavy lifting is on the hardware side, purchasing the system, but we imagine that model shifting as we move forward, where the hardware costs will be with low margins and the software recurring revenue plus services for building new modules will really take over all of the revenue, or a large part of the revenue.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Bobby and Juan, and thank you, Doug, for joining us and for your presentation. And thank you, Nehal, for catching my mistake. So before we move on, just one quick reminder to please vote for our Audience Choice Award. And with that, let's move on to Brian, CEO of StreetSense.
Hi, everyone. Brian DiCecco here with StreetSense. Thank you for having me. So at StreetSense, we are revolutionizing the way that cities and drivers manage the curb. And when we think about curb management at StreetSense, we're thinking about those 10 billion curb interactions that occur in the United States every year. Whether those are ride-sharing pickups and drop-offs or package deliveries, or with growing trends in micromobility, they could be scooters or mopeds being parked along the curb. And what we heard from the marketplace and from people in positions charged with managing these curbs at cities, it's been putting immense pressure on the decisions they have to make in terms of optimizing the curb space. One city official put it to us this way: they believe that the single most undervalued real estate asset in all of North America are city curbs. And that's the opportunity and the challenge that StreetSense is taking on. So StreetSense plans to optimize curb management using a proprietary camera network and delivering real-time insights to both cities and drivers to make better informed decisions about the curb. If you're trying to put us into a category, we're sort of working at the convergence of IoT, artificial intelligence, and smart city technology. But to really boil it down, just think about cameras on light poles, looking down at the curb, making detections automatically, and then relaying that information in real time to the people that need it to make decisions. When you think about the value that we're able to provide for cities, we're going to be increasing ticketing revenue by making automatic detections of where illegal parking may be occurring. We're going to be allowing the city managers to make better planning decisions about how space is being allocated, reduce traffic congestion, and also eliminate some manual processes cities are using now to make these decisions. So just by way of example, if you think about Pittsburgh, who made $31 million in revenue from street parking and then parking transactions, if our software solution and IoT solution is able to deliver just a 10% improvement in pricing and parking spot turnover and enforcement, we're talking about $3 million more in revenue that cities are desperate to get, especially during these times. That doesn't even factor in some of the more ancillary benefits like reduced congestion and pollution and so forth. From the perspective of drivers, we're able to eliminate the need to ever have to worry about parking again. They can simply put in their destination, be navigated to the nearest available spot, and pay for the parking in the app. So it's important to note in terms of our business model, we're not asking the cities to make a big infrastructure investment in installing our cameras. Instead, the way that we capture revenue is from the drivers. They would charge a 30-cent convenience fee for paying for parking, and the city would still receive its revenue as it normally does. So this is key for us to avoid long billing cycles and budgetary constraints that cities might be facing. In terms of revenue, we're projecting that we could be up to $53 million in revenue operating in 33 cities by year 10. And in terms of competition, a lot of our competitors are sort of playing around the edges of this space, but none are looking holistically at the entire challenge that the curb presents. So while some may be doing parking payments, others might be doing something with loading zones, others might be doing curb detections, we're bringing a best-in-class solution to all of these fronts, and again, approaching it more holistically. In terms of the team bringing this to market, we have experience in business development, AI and machine learning, engineering, and we also have a great network of advisors, including successful entrepreneurs, transportation professionals, and researchers at Carnegie Mellon University's Traffic 21, and AI and machine learning experts also helping us to bring this to market. In terms of traction, we are launching a paid pilot in Pittsburgh. And in the future, with any funds that we receive today, we're going to be investing in hardware for paid pilots moving forward. So again, lastly, when you're thinking about StreetSense, think about those 10 billion curb interactions that occur every year. but think about the StreetSense solution being able to optimize and monetize them for cities and their residents. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Brian. Let's head over to our judges. Nehal, perhaps you can kick us off.
All right. So thank you. I just want to start by saying I love the Venn diagram that you had there on the slide. It kind of really captures the landscape there. All right. So a couple quick questions. One is, what is, I know you mentioned there's not too much of capital investment that a city would have to make in purchasing a solution like yours, right? Who is typically the economic decision maker for giving the go ahead for something like this? Your pilot, a scale up, who's your ideal decision maker?
No, sorry about that. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, that's fine. Go ahead.
Yeah, so we've talked to about 30 cities about the solution, really helping develop the value proposition. And part of the opportunity, part of the challenge is that every city is different. But with that, we do have a couple of opportunities. Within some cities that are large enough, there is actually a curb management division who would have some budgetary authority to make an investment like this for a pilot. Within other cities, it could roll up to somebody as high as the mayor or the city council. But again, this isn't an economic decision. This is a permission to install the cameras decision for the entire solution.
In your experience, have you found it easy to kind of get those permissions, or is there lots of layers of bureaucracy that you have to go through?
Yeah, so it would vary by city. Some cities, and this is why, like when we go to market, we would target small to mid-sized cities who have the need for a solution like this, but also have a little bit more nimble infrastructure. Pittsburgh's a great example, a very forward-thinking city with smart technologies like this. So they would be a great candidate, but we also talked to folks in Columbus, Denver, Seattle, who expressed interest.
All right, well, you already answered my third question, which was what's an ideal city? So I'll let the other judges take over.
Great, thank you.
Juan, I saw you on mute. Would you like to jump in?
Sure, thank you. And thanks for the pitch, Brian. I guess I want to make sure I understand a few things about the model. So one, you mentioned that you have to negotiate with the city to install a camera network that the city pays for, and then they pay for nothing thereafter, and the drivers, you generate revenue from the drivers paying for parking. Is that correct?
Yeah, so the way that the model would work as we're currently going to market is the city would approve us to install the cameras. We would fund that ourselves, and we would be paid back by the drivers making payments on the mobile app for parking. We would capture a 30-cent convenience fee from the drivers. That would offset our costs and lead to profitability after year 3.
Okay, did you guys consider potentially working with the cities to develop some sort of subscription model with the cities or a value-based model with the cities, since you are going to be generating additional revenue for the cities from ticketing and parking enforcement? It seems like they would be the natural choice to pay for your services versus the drivers that you'll have to get to download your app, use it, and then at some point they're going to find out that you're also working with the city to generate additional ticketing revenue for the city. So have you thought about that sort of conflict there that you might be in with the drivers?
Sure, and it's a balance, absolutely. We are providing the drivers with real value in terms of parking spot availability, navigation. It's an end-to-end experience that's much better than circling the block for 10 minutes. So they are receiving real value. In terms of the city, we do foresee maybe a premium subscription model where they can opt into additional data analysis, some level of even consulting. However, to avoid the budgetary constraints that cities are facing now and will likely be ongoing, we thought the best way to go about this is to charge that 30-cent convenience fee to drivers. And just by way of example, we see about an 80% adoption rate of mobile payments across the country. So drivers are accustomed to making mobile payments and being charged a convenience fee, but they're not they don't have the other benefits that StreetSense brings.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Vaughn. Bobby, any questions on your end?
Sure. Thanks for the presentation, Brian. I'm curious about adoption from the driver side. So I would assume that the way you're looking at this is most people now, as they're traveling, or maybe using Waze or Google Maps or whatever to navigate to where they might be looking. And then at that point, they're looking for a parking space. And so it seems like it's going to be very difficult to get the drivers to switch from one app to the other. Is there some intent to create like an API that you would plug in so you reach the destination and then you guys kind of trigger, okay, now you're at your destination, you're looking to park? How are you going to break into the fact that everybody kind of defaults to a Google Maps to navigate from point A to point B?
Yeah, so we would be leveraging, the plan is to leverage an API into Google Maps. And I think, Bobby, your point is a good one, is that people navigate to their destination, which oftentimes isn't where they have to park. So they are left really without a plan of where to go. And it could be a spot right around the corner they can't see. Our solution can make the detection and route them directly there.
And then another question, just on the camera systems in that installation and maintenance, are these camera systems just kind of off-the-shelf solutions? And once they're installed, what's the kind of anticipation in terms of like maintenance and repairs and replacement for that hardware?
Yeah, so what we're looking at is, I don't know if this is our term or not, but kind of custom off the shelf. So they're going to have a custom element to them. But it's important to note too that with the way that we're building the cameras, they're going to be profitable at the camera level, including things like data, annual maintenance. They're going to have a 4-year lifespan is how we built them into the model. So they will be profitable from day one based on the hardware costs and then the revenue we expect to generate from each camera.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you, judges. And thank you so much, Brian, for joining us tonight. All right, with that, let's head on to our next presentation. Next up, we have Michael, President and COO of Heart.io.
Hi, I'm Michael Leisure, co-founder of Heart.io, and we are pairing artificial intelligence with the electrocardiogram to enable smarter cardiac triage. So let's jump right into the problem. Today, there is no one test for the determination of coronary artery disease, which is the buildup of plaque in your heart vessels, which leads to acute events such as heart attacks, which leads to a lot of unnecessary testing for the patient, oftentimes taking multiple blood tests, multiple stress tests, even multiple CAT scans to come to a final diagnosis, which leads to a lot of extra costs for the payer and inefficiencies for the healthcare network, which drives an annual cost to the US healthcare system about $170 billion. So that's the answer to this problem is pretty simple. What if we paired artificial intelligence with the electrocardiogram, the first test in the cardiovascular diagnostics pathway, to allow for better risk stratification of patients into high risk, moderate risk, and low risk, which will lead to a number of efficiencies within the systems, such as a reduction in extraneous testing, faster diagnoses, and better patient outcomes, all while leading to better bottom line margins for all. So how does it work? As the electrocardiogram comes out of the machine in a digital format, we send it to the cloud via our secure API, where we match it up with a clinical database of electrocardiograms and known patient outcomes to provide a report for clinician review, which returns information in a way that they're used to seeing, requiring little to no training costs to implement. And as we take it to the market, we're aiming on planning on a fee-for-service model, about $50 for read, which is similar to what you get with a stress electrocardiogram or a stress test today. So we set out to prove the value of our algorithm, ECGIO, at the end of 2019, early 2020, in a large-scale validation study of about 1,600 patients, where we aimed to predict the presence and severity of coronary artery disease. We're able to do so with a sensitivity, which is the power to rule in disease in patients who have disease, of 93%, and specificity, which is the power to rule out disease in patients who don't have disease, about 96%. Compared to what the FDA considers the first step today in cardiovascular diagnostics for coronary artery disease, the stress EKG, which is about 62% sensitive and 68% specific. Moving forward, we have a small sample of the studies that we're looking forward to running in the near future right here to further validate our product. To introduce the team, you have myself, who's a former life sciences consultant at Accenture. We have Utgers, who's a bioengineering PhD working full-time for Heart.io, who has experience in AI research through Google and through his PhD. And we have Adam, who's a bioengineering PhD working full-time for Heart.io with extensive experience in life science research over the last 7 to 10 years. On the advisory side, we have John, who has multiple successful exits in the cardiovascular device space, who helps spearhead our business development efforts, and Dr. Salik Gutanov, who's an AI director at Apple and the top machine learning professor at Carnegie Mellon, who verifies and validates that our AI methodologies are sound. In our recently formed clinical advisory board, we have 3 cardiologists here with over 100 years of combined experience and over 1,000 combined applicable publications. As we go to market, the key initial customer is the integrated delivery network, who function as both healthcare provider and insurance payer, because they're able to see cost benefits on both sides of the coin through greater efficiencies, lower costs, and better patient outcomes. And we aim to launch in all offerings within the network. So it's the emergency department, outpatient, urgent care, even telehealth, where there's well over 300 million electrocardiograms performed annually. As we get there today, we're launching another high volume validation study before launching our pivotal study for the FDA and going into our Series A. We have multiple potential exit opportunities either before, during, or after commercialization. Anyway, I'm Michael Leisure with Heart.io, and we're aiming to bring cardiovascular diagnostics in the future more quickly, more accurately, and at a fraction of the cost. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Michael. Let's head over to our judges. How about Bobby? Let's start with you.
Thanks, Tara. Michael, great presentation. It's really pretty phenomenal product. I mean, really amazing results you guys have had, so congratulations. In terms of what you anticipate to be the best strategy for an exit or an acquisition, and what phase are you thinking, and along what time frame are you thinking is going to be kind of an optimum outcome when you're thinking about investment and otherwise for this?
Yeah, so what we're thinking about in terms of an exit is actually going through our FDA approval. We're taking the pre-market approval pathway through the FDA, which is historically the highest bar to get through, because we think it'll build the largest moat for our product. And we don't see, given the results of our product today in our initial studies, that it's going to be that high of a hurdle for us to compete against the standard of care technologies. So we envision going through at the very least that study and getting that approval piece before going for an exit, just because it will build a large amount of IP protection for an acquirer. And the acquirers in the space would be folks who have likely your electrocardiogram machines today, your Philips, your GE, your Siemens. They've all attempted to do stuff like this in the past and have failed. So we're thinking probably in terms of time frame, sometime in the next 2 to 4 years, 2 to 5 years, somewhere in that realm for an exit.
And just as a follow on, and you touched on this, which is that from a hardware perspective, the hardware exists. This is really going to be, this is purely the AI, the software, the cloud, and then the application from there, the data taken from there.
Correct. So today, pretty much any large scale network, not necessarily if you go out to your most rural sites, will have electrocardiogram storage systems, which store the actual digital data regardless of machine, regardless of sample rate, regardless of gain. And we're able to take and standardize the outputs of all of those machines for interpretation.
Great. Thank you.
No problem.
Thanks, Bobby. Nehal, maybe we can pass it over to you next.
Yep. So how do you position against existing telemedicine, EMR, and remote monitoring platforms?
Yeah, so the existing current standard for electrocardiogram interpretation is onboard or either onboard the machines or within the EMRs, there is additional electrocardiogram interpretation beyond what the first acquirer is taking. Those today are looking for arrhythmias, acute events such as heart attacks, or other really point of presentation events or prior events such as a prior infarction. So we're not necessarily looking for that. Our positioning is that we provide a stronger point of care aid to diagnosis to allow for that risk stratification of patients who may not necessarily be those who urgently need to go to a coronary catheterization, but are those for whom a next step decision need to be made. So it would be your patient, your 35-year-old male who presents to the emergency department with chest pain. Rather than keeping them on observation for 12 hours, perhaps you use our test to rule them out more quickly.
And would you factor in comorbidities? Would you, take in that data from EMRs and factor in comorbidities?
Today, we do not do that on the platform, and it's by design.
Okay.
Current electrocardiogram interpretation algorithms take into account about 76 to 80 parameters with electrocardiogram and match them up with databases that are relatively generalized across population. We believe, and our hypothesis is that the electrocardiogram is the changes between the electrical signal across different points of the electromagnetic pump field are similar and objective across all populations. Changes in the field, changes across the field will indicate changes in a patient's coronary risk, regardless of who they are. That is our hypothesis, and that is what we've seen.
Okay. And one final question. You mentioned selling to, or your ideal customer being an IDN, such as UPMC, and that your business model was, I think you mentioned $50 per read, that would kind of be pushed out to the IDN. So who would that $50 per read circle back to from a business model? Would that be to a UPMC? Because the complexity with the IDN is that they're payer provider built into one, right? So
So
how do you work that out?
So it will end up going back to the payer. So there are reimbursement codes for electrocardiograms and stress electrocardiograms, and there's actually reimbursement codes that are higher than those for AI interpretation of electrocardiograms. Those exist in the realm of $250 to $300. So the cost will go back to the insurer, but they will save dollars on the extraneous tests not being run. And in a hospital setting, the CPT is not necessarily where the money's coming from. In a hospital setting, the money is generally coming from a DRG, a diagnosis-related grouping, as opposed to a CPT. So overall, the system will save money. But yes, to answer your question more simply, the dollars will trace back to the payer.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nehal. Juan, would you like to close us out?
Sure. Thank you, Michael. Real quick, I just have two questions. One, you mentioned earlier that you guys were taking the ECG results, comparing them to a database, I assume of prior patient ECG results. Where are you obtaining that data, and are you paying for it? And then the second question is sort of a follow-up to Nehal's. How many ECGs are currently performed annually by your target customer?
Yep. So we have a database today of about 10 million electrocardiograms that come from a couple sources. There's publicly available sources. There's data sources that we've gone and we've acquired, and there's actually proprietary collected data that we've gone through with our clinical partner. And of those, about, I think it's in the realm of 500,000 of those signals have a paired coronary angiogram, which is the test that determines the presence of coronary artery disease. So we utilize a specialized subset of deep learning, semi-supervised learning, to be able to use any electrocardiograms that come in. That's one of our competitive advantages, to draw more in-depth inferences than you would with just taking your normal machine learning algorithms. And the second part of your question, can I ask you to repeat the second part of your question, because I was thinking about deep learning?
No, thank you for the first answer. Yeah, it was really more of I guess a market size question.
Yes.
Really wanted to understand, how many ECGs are performed annually by your target.
Yeah, so in the United States, there's about 300 million electrocardiograms performed annually, 300 to 330 million in all settings. Within the integrated delivery network settings, it's probably sitting somewhere in the 60 to 100 million range. On a network by network basis, folks aren't releasing their number of tests, but given the size of the integrated delivery network presence in the US, you got your Kaisers, You got your UPMCs here in town, and your Highmarks here in town as well. Given the size of those and the number of patients going through, you can estimate it to be somewhere between 60 and 100 million.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Michael, and thank you to our judges. Briefly, before we move on to our final three presenters, I'd like to give one quick reminder to our audience. Please make sure that you're voting for your favorite company. You're rating the team so that we can tally those votes at the end of the evening for our Audience Choice Award. Also, a quick reminder to our three judges, make sure you're inputting your scores on the Pittsburgh Entrepreneurship Platform so that we can tally your votes at the end of the event as well. And so with that, next up we have Amber, founder of Conscious Unbiased. Please join me in welcoming her to our virtual stage.
Hello, everyone. My name is Amber Thompson. I'm the founder of Conscious Unbiased. And I have a story about a colleague of mine. He's a Black man. He spent a lot of time building a platform for a retail company, building code to translate this company's platform into 13 languages, helping it deliver to over 52 countries, and never received a promotion at the end of the year finishing those products. So I say this to say that companies are creating career-ending and life-crippling issues for Black people globally. And feeling included matters. 58% of people of color are on guard at work due to attacks related to their marginalization. A half of all complaints of discrimination lead to retaliation. And only 11% of our 890 publicly traded companies released their diversity and inclusion targets. Now, introducing Conscious Unbiased, we're kind of like Glassdoor for minorities, but only going beyond just showing problems to fixing them. We want to take the pressure off of companies from being leaders in this difficult space and providing data insights for underrepresented and marginalized employees, for better recruitment, retention strategies, or even ESG strategies. So we've automated data collection, analyses, and solutions to cut time and cost up to 60% in making decisions and the cost and effective solutions. So we built a machine learning tool to provide a strategic roadmap that translate root cause issues into business outcomes. Employees come to our platform and complete an anonymous survey. We analyze that data, and then we populate a root cause analysis with interventions. Companies can choose which interventions they'd like to start, and then we monitor the progress, starting through that progress with employees again. So right now, companies are spending billions of dollars a year on ineffective solutions and withholding data. So losing an employee can cost up to $114,000 or more, depending on the salary. So spoiler alert, foxes are guarding the hen house. And based on a report from Mercer, there are over 105 diversity and inclusion products on the market today, and none of their primary businesses address D&I challenges. So we interviewed executives of 50 global companies, and they all have expressed a need for experience of marginalized employees to be fully transparent and accessible. So we were able to index 30 companies in our first MVP. We're on our second MVP. We've raised $19,000. We have one paid pilot, and we have an ambassador program coming to you starting today. And currently, leaders are relying on specific reports with data that does not share the full picture, and tools and resources that are owned by the company, putting the needs of company images over transformation. That's why we own the data. We provide root cause analysis, we make systemic change, and we publicly share that information to impact communities beyond workplaces. So our customer acquisition relies on building community with employees first. So like I said, our ambassadors will be reaching out to professional development organizations and industry groups in the healthcare, hospitality, finance, or computer science industries. We'll publicly share those reviews, and then we'll take that data to the companies to provide solutions. And focusing on small and medium-sized business development services in just the city of Pittsburgh, our target area market is 8%, with an annual revenue of $780,000 just in this city. So we will be charging $200 or $400 for a subscription license. And this cost, the cost associated to recruitment, retention, and loss of productivity, this is where we start saving. And solving this problem requires a rare combination of skills. I have over 10 years of experience with marginalized populations in designing equitable systems. I have a master's degree in organization development and change management. I'm a founder of a change management consulting firm that I'm already using this model. And I'm a lifelong Black activist working to improve quality of life for Black folks globally. So if you're struggling to build a better workplace, please reach out to us at contact@consciousunbiased.com. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Amber. This was a great presentation. Nehal, would you like to kick us off?
Sure. Thank you for your presentation, Amber. So I had a quick question, two questions. One is, you mentioned Glassdoor and kind of having that you're a Glassdoor for underrepresented communities. Have you thought about strategic partnerships with companies like Glassdoor so that you can scale up your market traction? Or is that something that you don't see as a potential pathway?
Yeah, I don't see that as a potential pathway, mainly because of the background in my work. It's important that the companies who are building machine learning models are diverse. It's important that the leadership in these companies are diverse to understand perspectives. So I'm bringing a bunch of folks who are not traditionally in these spaces, and that would be an environment that I would not bring them in. So, but the partnerships I am cultivating are with organizations like DevColor, B Lab, and looking at government, like economic development agencies like our local conference.
And what do you anticipate, as sort of a critical mass of data points that would really kind of start helping you develop those algorithms or patterns that are going to then establish into specific outcomes for your company?
So we're targeting small and medium-sized companies because they're more nimble and flexible. We'll get that the interventions that work much faster. But we are reaching we are going for critical mass by August, so getting 3,000 reviews. But what I've been hearing is somewhere between 1,500 and 2,000 just for the machine learning. But that's even where 2,000 is kind of like where the conference wants us to come in and working with the Tech Council and membership organizations like that. That's what they're asking, around 2,000.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thanks, Nehal. Juan, would you like to jump in?
Sure. Thank you, Amber. I think you've hit on a pretty interesting problem. As you noted, a number of different companies across the globe really have been trying to tackle D&I, and let's just say the results thus far have been underwhelming. So I guess I'm curious on the go-to-market. You mentioned that you'll be focused on acquiring reviews from employees, sharing those reviews publicly, and then taking that data to companies to acquire them as customers. I mean, I guess curious is, have you thought about doing that in sort of almost the reversed order? Going to companies directly, surveying their employees to figure out what some of those issues are, and then actually developing models with them to address those issues. I guess I'm just curious as to why you would want to go out and try to acquire the reviews first rather than go to the companies and acquire reviews from their employees.
I think this is the struggle of me pitching this, is I'm a both and person. So I'm doing two things at once. I am also doing that with companies that are comfortable with working with this. A great example, companies that use similar products like this, companies don't trust, their employees don't trust the company saying, here's a service. Like Amazon literally said, our distribution workers love working here, 94%, a month after their distribution center unionized and they had to bust the union up. So like the reason why we're doing it that way, I'm focusing there. I have advisors and partners who will be doing that outreach to the larger organizations that really need this tool. and letting me focus on the machine learning development. That I'm a non-tech founder and I'm building algorithms, and it is complicated, but they're doing that outreach for me to larger companies and letting me focus on smaller and medium size. So it's a both and. We're doing both. It's just more important to say I'm building the machine learning.
Thank you. That's a fair point. Thanks.
Thanks, Juan. Bobby, would you like to close us out with a question for Amber?
Sure. Thanks, Amber, for the pitch. This is very interesting stuff. Are you looking to focus on particular underrepresented demographics with this initial surveying, or is it all underrepresented demographics in the employee base of companies?
It is everybody. So underrepresented, marginalized, allies. Allies are taking a survey from the perspective of me, Bobby, as a white man. I also see this happening to Amber as a Black woman. Also me as Amber as a Black woman, I see this happening to Kiana, who is a white neurodivergent woman. So and there's allyship. This is a space for allyship can do. This is a do, to be very honest, where we can change more than just the workplaces and change communities. So it's not just marginalized and underrepresented. We're centering those perspectives and identities because theory of marginalization says if we help the folks who are most negatively impacted, we help all, but we need all input to identify the root issue.
Do you see any major obstacles, Amber, to reaching that critical mass of responses by August that you're looking to achieve?
And I think based on my ambassadors, 3,000 we'll be reaching that before August. The leaders I spoke to are leaders of very large global companies, and I have not had pushback from any person that I've reached out about this. So I don't see critical mass being an issue. And I just see this moving a lot faster, which is why I'm here now. I need to hire folks because I'm selling and building at the same time.
And I suppose I think you've already kind of answered this question, but as far as team is concerned, you have advisors and folks around you supporting, but you are on your own on this at this moment and looking to kind of build a team?
Yeah, so I'm a consultant. I already do this. I just built a platform to scale faster. And I'm looking to, my next two hires, a COO and a CTO. I already have ambassadors and building the analysis and the research and development, that piece, fine. But the other two I need support on.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thanks so much, judges. And thank you so much, Amber. All right, everyone, we have our final two presenters coming up. Next, we have Sam, CEO of Duo Oncology. Please join me in welcoming Sam to our virtual stage.
Over 500,000 people this year will be diagnosed with cancer that cannot be cured by current therapies. Duo Oncology, a startup funded by $1 million from UPMC oncologists, is existing for these patients. I'm Sam Rothstein, a CEO and co-founder with nearly 15 years now in the development of pharmaceuticals like the ones here at Duo. We have a new type of drug chemistry that's specifically for treatment-resistant tumors. This is a pitch. I will be making forward-looking statements. Actually, it's a bit worse than that. I'll be taking a decade of groundbreaking research from here at University of Pittsburgh and UPMC and slotting it into the next 3 minutes. I'm going to end up leaving out some details about our world-class team, about our growing patent fence, even about all the studies we've run. I hope I can get to some of those in the Q&A. Duo Oncology is a life science company, a pharmaceutical startup. I think that makes us different than just about every other company that's pitched here so far. We have a new chemistry. It's patent pending, exclusively licensed. It creates optimally sized particles for penetrating dense, hard to treat tumors. We've established superiority in mouse models for things like pancreatic cancer and colorectal cancer. Our lead product is optimized for pancreatic cancer. It's one of the deadliest out there. And it's also one of the hardest to treat, with the lowest 1-year and 5-year survival rates of just about any other cancer. We'll be looking at pancreatic first, and moving into other potential market verticals for large cancer indications. Here's a look at the market data. The chart here shows global patient populations that are having the hard to treat prognosis. That's the light blue bars. We've identified these patients with a stroma biomarker. So we know they exist. And we know they are really some of the ones that are least served now by current therapies. We're starting out with our initial focus in pancreatic cancer. It's again that hard to treat cancer where over 81% of these patients have this stroma positive, hard to treat prognosis. It's also an orphaned indication. This is important because it qualifies us for an initial niche with potential for 7 years market exclusivity granted by the FDA and EMA. We can also then move into other cancers like bile duct cancer, colorectal cancer, and lung cancer. Here we have data from real patient-derived tumors grown in mice. In the tumor growth data here, our line is the light blue line. DO-207 stops tumor growth. We've compared it to an exact equivalent control of standard of care therapy, paclitaxel and gemcitabine. We see superiority to the standard of care, and we see an efficacy that's stopping tumor growth for, well, nearly 2 months beyond the scope of treatment. This type of data has our oncologist partners very excited about moving this product forward to market. Duo Oncology is not the only company with a nanoparticle designed to treat cancer. We are the only company, though, with this ultra small particle size. Our particles are an order of magnitude smaller than competing particles like Onivide and Abraxane. We also have looked at the clinical data. We know the particles coming up through the pipeline for our competitors. We know none of them have our exact particle size. They're all larger. They're all too large to enter the blood vessels in diseases like pancreatic cancer or bile duct cancer. Duo Oncology has a well-developed clinical strategy. Pharma life science and cancer has been around for a number of years, and there's been about 200 exits in the cancer immunotherapy space now in the past 10 years that dictate our model. It's clear. We have a phase 1 trial here that uses an accelerated titration design, surveying all our potential markets. It's the fastest way possible to determine a safe dose for pivotal testing. Pivotal testing, the trials needed for approvals in the FDA and by the European Union, is the historic exit point for companies like ours. And we can reach and start those trials as early as 2024. Onivide is the most recent cancer nanomedicine exit. It's the perfect typical case study for our space. At exit, we see immediate revenue in a niche orphan market with long-lasting patent protection, extending nearly 2 decades. This is the picture for Duo Oncology's first indication, pancreatic cancer. And what we have the potential to do much more than just pancreatic cancer. We have a biomarker that dictates responsive tumors in patients. This lets us expand into other indications. We see activity in mice that suggests synergy with leading immunotherapies. These are the therapies that cure patients. We can take hopeless cases right now in pancreatic cancer, where there's a very short life expectancy, and completely transform how these patients respond to treatment. That's really it. We have a great product, really promising data in mice, support from the local oncology community, and we're embarking on the regulatory process and clinical trials this year to make that product a reality for patients. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Sam. I'm going to head over to our judges. Juan, would you like to kick us off this time?
Sure. Thank you, Sam. Very interesting and compelling product. I guess 2 areas that I guess I'd love to give you more time to speak about. One, being the team itself, I'd love to learn more about you and your co-founders and the remainder of the team that's working on this really interesting and critical technology solution. So if you could give
sure.
us on your team.
We've got it's been a bit of a wonderful collaboration. We've brought together 6 of us. The 2 lead inventors from University of Pittsburgh School of Pharmacy, who are both professors there. Great experience in formulation science and polymer chemistry. They've taken chemistry from how DNA binds together, forming those long chains, reworked it to form these tiny particles. Really fascinating work. Then we have myself, I've been doing nanoparticles now for nearly 20 years, pharmaceutical development for the past decade. And we've paired myself up with Dr. Stephen Thorne, who's head of Western Oncolytics here at Pittsburgh, and has already struck a large deal with Pfizer to develop his product. On the clinical end, we have 2 UPMC oncologists, Dr. Jing Zhu, who's been boots on the ground here, helping us do clinical trial design, and Dr. Stanley Mark, who's just an exceptionally recognized oncology doctor. He's chairman in the Hillpin Cancer Center here at UPMC. It's just been a tremendous effort in being an advocate for what we're doing and making sure that's going to get to patients. And actually on the accomplishing things side, we have world-class experts like Mark Tracy, Karen Williams, who are probably not known to you guys, but for those of us working in the field of oncology and product development, are just wonderful to have on board, bringing some decades of experience to our virtual pharma company.
Thank you.
Next question.
Thanks, Sam. Juan, did you have one more, or was it just one?
I did, but I want to make sure that, that Bobby and Nehal also get to ask questions here. But if I have a quick question, just on the regulatory pathway, you mentioned that the phase 1 trials could start as soon as 2024. I guess I'd love to understand I want to make sure I get that timing right. But would also love to understand what needs to happen between now and the start of your phase 1 trials.
Milestones are clear. Phase 1 trials, 2022. Pivotal studies, 2024. Next milestone is the pre-IND meeting. That's in September. That's followed by an IND, Q1 of 2022, followed by the start of the phase 1 study, Q2 of 2022. We have a partner lined up who can handle GMP production, which is critical for feeding that IND. And we also have mentioned Karen Williams running the oncology clinical program, organizing sites both here in the US, Europe, and Australia, which is best practice for moving a trial forward rapidly.
Perfect, thank you.
Sam. Bobby, let's move over to you next.
Sure. Thank you, Sam, for the presentation. This is very interesting. And I'm sure Nehal is going to have significantly more sophisticated questions than I will. And so I apologize if this is a silly question to ask, but I'm wondering, what is the actual therapeutic application? How is this actually going to be administered in humans?
Sorry, this is an intravenous medication. It's the same route of administration used for standard of care currently. We see a better biodistribution with our product, meaning that when we give the product to the whole body through a blood vessel, we see much more of the product going to cancer than we do with current therapies. And that's really the foundation for the impact we have. There's more to it, but that's a good start.
And in terms of side effects, I assume that's going to be unearthed during as you phase through trials, but any indications thus far of versus existing treatments, which are obviously not effective in the long run against these types of cancers generally, but how are those side effects kind of measuring up?
We've done some initial toxicity testing in mice. Our product actually takes the existing standard of care, that paclitaxel and gemcitabine, and fits it into this new carrier package. So we're what's known as a reformulation. That gives us essentially a lower side effect profile than the existing drugs, but with already known toxicities. We know how much of those drugs, based on their clinical use right now, is safe to give. So we've taken old drugs, changed the packaging around those drugs, and seen dramatic new outcomes, at least in terms of the mice, and hopefully in terms of patients next year.
Great. Thank you.
Nehal, would you like to close us out?
Sure. Bobby, that was a great question, by the way. So I'll piggyback off of that question. You mentioned formulation and that you're going to have reformulation sort of models that you're going to use the nanoparticles for, right? What do you anticipate, in terms of, so the bile duct cancer and the pancreatic cancer that you're targeting, do you anticipate there to be a different formulation for each of those? And if so, what's the turnaround time for kind of coming up with that formulation and testing that formulation in terms of efficacy and toxicity and so on?
Thank you, Nehal. We've looked at the clinical biomarker and histology data for both pancreatic and bile duct cancer, as well as the phase 3 trial data for the two. And we anticipate the same formulation, exact same drug product being used in both cases.
Okay.
We are working with the regulatory experts now to figure out if we need separate clinical trials for those two indications, or if because of their orphan nature, we can run them in a single phase 2/3 registry trial pivotal study.
And do you then anticipate, in terms of an IP strategy, do you anticipate each of these formulations, or when you reformulate as you kind of go across a disease spectrum, do you anticipate those to be different IP strategies, or would they be new patents? Would they be follow-on patents, or kind of just different indications that you're going to pursue?
Sure. When I spoke about market verticals, actually the cancers we've picked for that list, those that form the top 5 indications, are all responsive to the drugs in the lead product and should not require additional drug product or regulatory approvals for us to access. Well, we do need a regulatory approval to get the phase 3 to get an indication, but we don't need to change what we're manufacturing or how we're manufacturing it. There's a possibility that we could tweak the chemistry to go after other indications and to do interesting things with immunotherapy, but that's really beyond the scope of the business model. That's beyond the scope of the $1 billion exit.
Okay.
That's not addressed in our total addressable market or peak sales figures. It would be a nice carve out for a follow-on company though, and something that's very interesting.
Okay, so just so I'm kind of a little bit clear, your IP is not the formulation, or is it the formulation? And
I'm sorry.
that was
yes, the IP. We have the patent is
Yeah.
composition of matter. It's the polymer chemistry used to form this small particle. We have we're probably going to file next year or before next year actually, on methods of production patent, which is standard, how we make the particles at scale, and then follow that with IP about the doses required, the dosing levels required for efficacy in cancer patients.
Okay.
That would be in conjunction with a phase 1 trial. That's me speculating based on past data from therapies like Onivida, Abraxane, and Vizios,
Sure.
all of which covered all 3 of those patent families.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thanks so much, judges, and thank you, Sam. Last chance for our audience to vote for your audience choice winner. So make sure you get those votes in before the end of our next presenter. So with that, last but certainly not least, please join me in welcoming Mark, CEO of Bloomfield Robotics, to the virtual stage.
Thanks. Mark DeSantis, CEO of Bloomfield. Appreciate the opportunity to present here. We assess the health and performance of plants, and we do that one plant at a time. If I took the world's crops and put them into 2 buckets, there's row crops, which is about 80% of all crops grown in the world. And that's a multi-trillion-dollar market in itself. But then there's another category of crops that are specialty crops. And those are everything you can buy in Whole Foods, plus cannabis flowers and a variety of other crops. And all of those crops need to be inspected. Right now, the regime for, say, grapes, or really any specialty crop, whether it be grapes, apples, peaches, pears, cannabis, is a individual will walk among the crops and examine the plant and everything on the plant and make a judgment about that plant. In a sense, what that person is doing is functioning both as a doctor and a coach. As a doctor, they're looking at the plant for things that are problematic, mold, disease, infestation. And when they see it, they have to do something about it immediately. As a coach, they're continuing to inspect the plant throughout the season. They're looking to see the performance of the plant. Are the grapes as big as they expected to be? Are the clusters as robust as they expected to be? Are the leaves as green? Are the leaves too dense, etc.? All of those things are visually identified. The problem with using humans, and really that's the dominant way crops are inspected in the world since agriculture was invented 10,000 years ago, is when you're using people to inspect not just hundreds, but thousands of acres. The reality is you can only inspect a tiny fraction, perhaps as little as 0.5%. The other problem is when you use humans to inspect anything, you're going to get the subjectivity inherent in that inspection. If I gave the same x-ray to 5 radiologists, I'll probably get 4 opinions. We changed that. And the way we change that is we image plants with our camera that rides on on a farm, anything that moves, tractor, ATV, anything, passes in front of the plant, images the plant and everything on the plant and everything associated with the plant, and also geolocates the plant. It then provides an assessment that the grower uses to determine what they need to do to treat not only their crops, but individual plants. You know, the challenge right now, the lowest level of resolution for any farm is the acre. That's the most detailed knowledge that most farmers can get of their crops. There's a dream out there, it was started 30 years ago, called precision agriculture. And the ideal scenarios, I actually would inspect individual plants and give each plant separate treatment. Thus, I could maximize the yield of the crop. Well, now you can, because you can know the condition of every single plant in your grow. The system is simple. The camera collects the data. Some of it's analyzed on the device. The rest of the image data goes up to the cloud. Our AI platform assesses it, and then the grower gets an assessment. I'll talk about that in a sec. Our growers have used various ways to move their cameras around. The one on the upper left is a vineyard in Prosser, Washington, where we have a customer. The one on the right is a vineyard in California, where we have a customer. The bottom right there is a vineyard in France, in Bordeaux, France, where we have a customer. And the one on the left is another French vineyard. And down on the bottom there is one in Oregon. So various ways. So the farmer just simply needs to move that camera around. And the result, and I won't bore you with the details, is a very detailed understanding of each plant and everything associated with that plant in the grow. We started in 2019. We were able to receive about $1 million in grant money from 2019 through 2020. We put an MVP in the field last year. We're in about 10 or 11 vineyards last year. Now we are in 15 vineyards in 5 countries. We've also added blueberries. We're assessing a blueberry grow in Peru, an apple orchard in Italy. Our vineyards, 3 in France, 2 in Bordeaux, 1 in Burgundy. We have 1 in Tyrol, Italy. We're in 4 states in the US and Canada. And as I said, we'll be adding other crops. You might know one thing in there, particular, the NASA bug. We recently won an STTR to develop that blue camera that I showed you earlier, to develop a version of that will go into the ISS in about 2 years. There's actually a little greenhouse in the ISS. We'll be assessing plants there. We generated last year, in our first year of operation, about 65K. To date, we've generated about 300,000K in bookings as of last week. We've raised $1 million on top of the roughly $1 million we've received in grant money over the life of the company. We've got a great team. Some of these folks I've worked with in the past. Tim and George started this technology out at Carnegie Mellon after about 5-10 years of research, developing ag tech products. George is 20 years in ag tech. He's our chief scientist, co-founder. Tim was one of his grad students. They really learned a thing or two about building robots, which for ag, which is growers don't want to buy robots. So what they decided to do is carve out the brains and eyes and sell that as a service. And thus the company was born. I came on as an advisor 1.5 years ago, begged them to let me join the team, and they asked me to be CEO right after that. Jason worked at Uber ATG. He's head of products, done a great job. Ben worked with me in a previous company where we assessed streets, roadways for cities around the world. And he sold AI to cities all over the world. And this team is further augmented by another 5 folks. We have a person in Paris who's full-time handling our operations in Europe. And then we have I have 2 people on the West Coast handling our operations there. So I look forward to your questions.
Thanks so much, Mark. Moving over to our judges. Bobby, would you like to kick us off?
Sure, I would. Hey, Mark, how you doing?
Good.
Mark, congratulations on all the success thus far. In terms of the actual hardware itself, what's kind of the current cost, and what are your goals in terms of cost reduction, and what's the desired kind of ultimate form factor you're going, or does it vary depending on what type of crop you'd be analyzing?
Yeah, good question. Bill of materials on the camera is about 10 grand right now. That's because we're building them in batches of 2 or 3. Most of that's in the cost of the stereo lenses. That will come down probably about 2/3. We're going to outsource manufacturing The form factor probably in, I'd say, 2 years or so will change so that it's deformable. When right now you have 2 lenses in a box, what if you had the lenses on a tree? You could accommodate the structure of the plant. Blueberry bushes in Peru, for example, are about 3 feet high. Apple trees in Washington State can be as high as 25 feet. So you want to be able to get coverage so the grower will be able to configure the lenses to get coverage on the plants itself. The AI, the secret sauce, if you will, the core of this is the deep learning. We've assessed about, to date, about 700 million grapes and about 8 or 9 varieties in 15 different vineyards around the world. And so when you've done that kind of breadth and depth, you're starting to get smart about grapes. So it's our hope to add other crops here in the next coming months and year.
And one last question, Mark, is there, so there's a lot of obviously very useful data to the growers. Is there an aspect of the business whereby the AI and ML could be offering some kind of solution-based information, like this is what you could do to improve yield in future growth cycles, future years?
Yeah, in fact, the growers continue to give us ideas on that regard. And we've been reluctant to go too far into the prescription phase because we are talking about, some of our customers. I'll give you one example, Chateau Palmer in France. They make the famous Chateau Margaux. They're one of the premier vineyards in the world. And so we're a little timid about saying, hey, you should rethink how you grow your grapes. So there's a little bit of hesitation. Having said that, they give us all kinds of ideas. So we'll ultimately next year start to move in more prescriptive mode. Right now, we're more in the predictive mode and assessment mode. So yeah, absolutely, that's where it's going.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bobby. Nehal, would you like to go next?
All right, still muted. Sure. So I was wondering, because you're focusing right now on vineyards, right? And that's kind of your I guess primary market application. Are there any particular attributes of types of crops where the solution is an ideal kind of product market fit, I guess? Like are there sensitivity, sensitivity attributes, things like that?
Right. We've thought about that a lot. So like I mentioned, we have a blueberry grow, which is one of the largest, it's the second largest grower of blueberries in the world. It's coming out of AgriVision. They're based across 3 continents. We're doing a test in Peru where they have their largest grow. So that'll yield some information. We've done some preliminary tests with apples. We're adding an apple orchard in Italy and in the UK and in Washington. We've done some preliminary tests there. But what it comes down to is, and the reason we're in specialty crops is what's the cost of failure?
Mm-hmm.
And that's really what it comes down to. These crops, specialty crops, can generate anywhere from $8,000 to $400,000 an acre. And if you're into cannabis, you're talking about millions an acre. So they're also monocultures, so one small problem in a part of the grow and you can blow out the whole grow. So that's it. The size, type of fruit or vegetable, not a big deal. We are outdoors exclusively right now, but we are in discussions with two of the 3 largest vertical farms in the world right now to do this indoor and see what's called CEA. And so we'll see where that plays out. We think we can do it there. It's a vegetable for us as far as we're concerned.
Right. And is it easy to kind of, scale across these different types of crops, or does the infrastructure change a little bit or not too much?
We've done all kinds of configurations. And I should mention too, of the 15 vineyards, 3 of them are table grapes. And so they are very different. I didn't know that before I joined this company. And there are probably at least a half a dozen physical configurations in vineyards, the way they trellis them, the cordons, the shape, and all those things. And so, we've had to accommodate, even in grapes, a very diverse set of environments. With some of the other crops, it's a little more complex because in the case of apple trees, they're not the apple trees that when I knew as a kid, they're actually 2-dimensional. They're actually grown in trellises and they're flat and very tall to allow for and picking. So those are Those are a little different configurations, very tall, so we had to make some adaptations there. But in essence, there hasn't been anything, and there's not likely to be anything that's where we have to invent any kind of new science or basic engineering. It's more in the configuration, the collection. Yeah.
Got it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Juan, I believe we have time for one question.
Sure. Actually, I have two quick ones, but I think they're sort of mildly related. But thank you, Mark. Just curious, I guess, how are you actually pricing your service? And then I'd love to understand also what the performance improvement is versus the human eye. So what's the yield improvement?
Yeah. We use what I call the cell phone model, which is, when you sell stuff to farmers, they buy by the acre, whether it's fertilizer or even services. We didn't want to do that because we want to encourage consumption. In other words, we want them to image as many plants as they want, as often as they want. So we borrowed an idea from cell phones, which is we're going to charge you a flat fee. You can image as many plants as you want, as often as you want. And the camera cost will be embedded and amortized into an annual contract. So there's no upfront fee. You can cancel the contract in 90 days. No one's done that. And the way we grow revenue per customer is analogous to a family of 5 buying cameras for everybody. They don't buy cameras, they buy plans. So when you look at a camera, you're moving it on a vehicle about 12 miles an hour. That gives you coverage of about 250 to 300 acres. Some of our growers have 16,000 acres. So one camera clearly isn't going to service their needs. So they'll buy multiple plans, as would a family buying multiple plans to get multiple phones and multiple coverage. The second question is, we've been in the field now a year and a half. The good news is everybody we started with a year and a half ago is still using it. Also, the good news is they keep coming back and telling us new things that they want to do with it. And in every case, we haven't lost a single one yet. They've said they've, in some way or another, have said, we can't imagine not doing this, not using this going forward, because we can now inspect every vine continuously. That's unheard of. That's just, it's never been done. Where in terms of actual performance, and I hesitate to go too far because we don't, we're still working on the numbers, but among our things that we pride ourselves on is catching problems before they become more serious. We've, in a number of times, have done that with a number of growers. The yield prediction, our yield prediction is quite good. Typical yield prediction in the game now is you only look at 1% and you're making a guess 6 weeks out. In our case, we're looking at half or all the grow and making our prediction 3 or 4 months out with a higher level of accuracy, up as much as 5 or 10% better prediction, which in one case yielded a 5% improvement in yield, which is a big deal in any grow. That's a massive improvement. I'm hesitant to go further than that because these numbers are very preliminary, but they're all positive. Point to us being, our goal was to be woven into the fabric of the farmer's routine. And so far, so good.
Awesome. Thank you to our judges. And thanks so much, Mark, and the rest of our presenters. So with that, we've heard from each of our founders. Now all of you judges have your work cut out for you. Thank you again to all the founders that joined us today. I know that I speak for the entire team at One Valley when I say that we were all very impressed. In fact, we were impressed with all 200 companies that signed up for the challenge, and it was really challenging to narrow it down to this group today. So best of luck. And in just a few moments, I'll be right back and we'll be announcing the winners. All right, everyone, we have our winners. I know you're all waiting with bated breath. So without further ado, our audience prize, who will walk away today with 1 year of free premium passport, goes to Andrew, CEO and founder of Doors Unhinged. Congratulations, Andrew, and welcome to Passport. We'll be reaching out shortly to help you claim your membership. And since you are based in Pittsburgh, you'll be getting a free Pittsburgh Entrepreneurship Platform membership. And as a quick reminder to the audience, if you do not already have a Passport account, you can use the code challenge25 for 25% off your premium Passport membership. And if you're Pittsburgh based, head over to the Pittsburgh Entrepreneurship Platform to take advantage of our launch rate of $99. Once again, starting June 24th, those prices will go up. And now, without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and ask all of our founders to turn on their cameras. We're going to head into gallery mode to announce our finalists. To those of you who are announced as a finalist, once I say your name, feel free to unmute and say a few words to the audience as well. So here we go. The first company selected by our judging panel this evening to move forward to the finals event on July 8th is Codex Labs. So Allison, over to you.
Thanks, guys. I really appreciate you putting together this event and coming to Pittsburgh, because it's a city I grew up in and a city I love. So welcome.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Allison. Looking forward to seeing you and meeting you in person at our event on July 8th. And our next company that will be progressing on to the finals of the Pittsburgh Entrepreneurship Challenge with Allison is Bloomfield Robotics. So Mark, if you want to jump on as well, go ahead and unmute.
Hey, thanks. I'm honored, really. I really am. This is a great bunch of companies here. I'd like to talk to some of you if there's any way I can help some of you. Got some really great ideas. So very honored to be part of this. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. And finally, the company that was selected by our audience votes to move forward in the July 8th finals is Heart.io. So congratulations. And if you want to jump on as well. I don't see.
Yeah, thanks everybody. Thanks everybody watching at home. I appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And congratulations to our finalists. We're really looking forward to sharing the stage with you on July 8th. Before we end, I would like to just remind everyone of our second semifinals event, which is happening on June 8th. You can follow the link in the chat to RSVP now and find out which 3 companies will fill our remaining slots. I also want to take a moment to thank our amazing audience and to remind all of you that you can connect with any of the startups featured today via the Meet the Startups tab at the top of the page. So if you want to lock in your chance to tour the soon-to-be One Valley Innovation Center, you can also visit theonevalley.com/tour-Pittsburgh. On behalf of myself and One Valley, thank you to all of our judges for joining us tonight. And thank you so much to our audience for joining. And an extra special thank you to our founders. We can't wait to have you all back again soon. Take care, everyone.